Hey, welcome back to the Gabagools, episode 31.5, or are we just going to go up to 32? Either way, this is part two. This is the episode for MLB playoffs. Right now, if you guys are watching live with us, we're watching the Atlanta Braves versus Mets game. This has been an up and down game. Braves just took the lead 7-6 going into the ninth inning. Crazy game. But we kind of broke that down in the first half of our show. Let's talk about the second half. We're talking about baseball. We're talking about the playoffs, and we have some good matchups starting tomorrow. What do we feel about it, Dan?
Just starting with the American League, I'm excited to see a couple teams from your division get in this year.
Yeah,
I don't like seeing the same teams in it every year. I don't mind
same.
having the extra wild cards and getting some new teams in there. So, you know what? We'll see how Detroit and Kansas City do. I believe the first series is Detroit and Houston. That
Yep.
starts mañana. So you got the six-seeded Detroit versus the three-seeded Houston Astros. Winner of that will take on the number two-seeded Cleveland Indians. So
Guardians.
Guardians, that's right, that's right. Yeah, all these teams that like to change their names now. Jeez. Um, just from that little those couple teams, I'd like to see what Detroit can do. I think I still have to take Houston, especially with the way Houston finished the season. I mean, a couple months ago, Houston was 9 or 10 games back of Seattle, and then Seattle started to lose a bunch before the break, and then Houston just ran away with the division. And they didn't really run away with it; they won it by a couple games. But you know, shame on Seattle. We talked about this a few months ago that they should have went out and got a bigger bat or done something
Yep.
else. And you know what? They tried to make a couple decent moves that ultimately didn't pan out, and now you're going to be watching the postseason from the couch. So um, that's the reality that happens to teams every year. But with that first series, though, Detroit, Houston, I don't know who the projected pitching matchup is tomorrow. Do you have that?
I do have it. So it's
Boom.
Tarek Skubal, who actually I think had the triple crown for the American League,
Unreal.
versus Valdez. Um, this is an interesting matchup for me just because Detroit is one of the hottest teams in baseball. They've been hot since the All Star break. We mentioned it. And like we said, I said it too. I was like, Detroit's a team. And then I thought Pittsburgh might have put up a little bit more fight too, but they didn't. But this is kind of an interesting. This could be like the new age, team that kind of takes over for the American League too with Detroit, with AJ Hinch as the manager versus his former club with Houston, and that's a team that has a lot of question marks going forward. They're going to be very young next year. I don't think they re-sign Bregman, so Bregman walks, and you have to rely on a lot of your younger team. And right now, as it stands, I don't think Jordan Alvarez is even playing. Oh no, he's slotted in, but he was banged up this last week of the season. So we'll see what ends up happening with him. They're an aging team. They've been at it for a while. They've been dominant probably since 2015. And yes, they haven't had a whole many like they've made the World Series a bunch of times, but weren't lucky enough to win too many of them. But is this it for them? That's my question here. Is this the end of the dynasty for Houston?
Well, I mean, I think this is going to be potentially their biggest off season they've had since they've really started getting good about 10-ish years ago, like you said. So, yeah, I mean, they've got some big questions coming up in the off season. Like you mentioned it, Bregman is a free agent, I believe. I think Kyle Tucker is also a free agent. So I think they've got to figure out who they want to pay. And like you said, Bregman's getting a little bit older. Tucker's the younger player. So I think the speculation would be that they'd probably let Bregman walk and get his money somewhere else, and they're probably going to try to re-sign Tucker. But Houston's an organization that historically I don't think has spent a ton. I think
Basically, Altuve. Altuve's been the guy pretty much as
he
far back as I can remember,
he just
and
got
not
their
that,
biggest contract I think in their history, and it's not even that much. So
and it
you're
was
going to have to.
extended too.
and if they want to try to stay relevant, they're going to have to re-sign Tucker because of the
Oh,
age and
100%.
how good he is. And I don't know what the extension was for Altuve, but they're going to have to probably go over that for Tucker, no doubt.
100%. So two things. So yeah, they signed a extension with Altuve through 2029. Each year it's a front loaded one, so each year it'll go down. And then for Kyle Tucker, you were right. He's going to arbitration for 2025, so you have to extend him. He's been incredible, except for his hurt when he got hurt. But moving into this game too, the Mets just hit a home run at the top, a 2-run home run at the top of the ninth to take the lead again.
Wow.
Yeah,
This game was so slow the first couple innings. Albies hit a two-run homer in the I don't know, third, fourth inning or something like that off of McGill, and that was it for a few innings. And then now it's just been an explosion, and then it started to rain a little bit. And this is what you want. This is
yeah.
essentially this is basically the playoffs. I mean, I know technically we got to wait till tomorrow, but these two games are
Yeah,
essentially playoff games. And with the way this first one's been, I mean, my goodness.
yeah. Lindor, you can't ask for better baseball. But jumping back into that Houston series, I think the X factor will be Scooble. I mean, this is a winnable series for Detroit, and with how hot they are, I would not want to play them. That would be a team I say, hey, hopefully we don't face them. I know I think they could beat the Yankees. I'm going to be bold and say that. Um, will that happen? Will they actually meet them? We'll see. But it's a 3-game series against Houston, and like I said, Alvarez is banged up. Kyle Tucker has been kind of hot recently. I didn't even know they did this, but they signed Jason Hayward. So we'll see. We'll see what kind of magic they have left if they make that one last run with this group of guys. But yeah,
I just saw that they brought Hayward over, and I saw him playing left field, and I already saw him make a nice catch because that's basically the only thing he's ever done. It's
yeah.
been great out there in the outfield. Now, is that series? Is it best of three or five?
It's best of 3 for wild card.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was best of 5, but that's a divisional series. So once again, that's a winnable series if you throw. I mean, I don't know.
I don't know
If
who
the
their two.
Tigers
I don't know who their
go
two
on.
is. Detroit.
That's what I'm trying to figure out right now. It's like, who would I throw out there? It's Reese Olson. He's been having a good year. I don't know if you turn it over to their bull. I don't know, man. That's tough because their bullpen is kind of iffy too. I mean, they just called up Jackson Joby too, one of their better players. Do you throw
Oh,
him there?
interesting.
I mean, they find a way to win, and that's it's annoying for me as a Sox fan that you couldn't do that, but um, they don't have the star power to
Right.
maybe. But I would place a bet on them to win 100%. But we'll see.
Especially game one, because Scooble, like you said, has had just a magical year, man. He broke out in the biggest way. And
Yeah,
when you talk about, the best pitchers in the game right now in the postseason, I don't know if there is. I mean, I'd have to look at all the teams. Is there a better pitcher right now than Scooble?
I mean, you can make the argument that Skeens in the National League, but Scooble had the Triple Crown.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting, especially if Detroit gets into a real 5 or 7 game series where you can throw him at least 2 or 3
Right.
times, maybe. Then it gets really interesting. He's a lefty with the way he's done.
I could see them going 2 in this first series. I mean, it would be tough. If it goes to a game 3, I would bet you any money that you see him go out there at least for a couple innings. I mean, depending on how this game goes tomorrow, but
Yeah.
we'll see. I mean, he won 18 games. He had a 2.39 ERA, and then he led the National or American League in strikeouts. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. Like you said, the biggest question mark is who's their number 2 behind them. There really isn't one. But like I said, Houston's been super inconsistent, and that pitching staff has not looked good. But we'll see what ends up happening with them. So, did you say you're picking Houston?
I I did say I guess I was maybe going to go with Houston. Are we making our picks right here right now?
Sure, let's do it.
I don't even want to take the Astros, but you know what? I just don't know if Detroit has enough, and I'm just going to take Houston. I want to take the
It's a
Tigers, but
safe
I'm taking
bet.
Houston.
Yeah, I'll take Detroit. I talked them up enough. Let's go Detroit. AL Central. Now, staying in the AL, let's talk about a team or a matchup that we've seen in the past. 2014 and 2015, the Orioles versus the Royals. Kind of two young teams that like with two major superstars on their team. Gunnar Henderson from the Orioles, and this is not they have a lot more superstars, but still we're leaving it at one for now. Versus Bobby Witt Jr., two of the like potential future AL MVPs right here. Breaking out before our eyes, and it's kind of cool. We get to see him in the first round.
Now, every time we bring up Baltimore or I see Baltimore, I get upset. Similarly to with Seattle, because Seattle didn't do a lot at the deadline, and I feel like Baltimore. I've been saying this. I don't know how long. The last 2 years, they need another starting pitcher. Now they went out and got Corbin Burns. He's the number one. He's the game one starter. Okay. The thing that worries me for Baltimore is their starting pitching, and one thing that Kansas City has is some starting pitching that's solid. Seth Lugo had a great year this year, and I think they've got another guy or two over there. That
Seth
their name.
Lugo, Cole Reagan. Cole Reagan's is the guy getting the bump for game one versus Corbin Burns.
He's good.
Yeah, he's been incredible. He finished second in strikeouts for the AL.
And that's the thing, Baltimore, they had Grayson Rodriguez. I think he got shut down for the rest of the season, so I don't think they're going to have him, if I'm not mistaken, for the playoffs. And he was probably there too, if we're talking about it. So Baltimore could still get past Kansas City, but my worry for Baltimore is their lack of depth at the starting pitching. And then they also don't have their main closer with Felix Bautista, who's missed the whole year. And then they DFA'd Kimbrel because he had just a terrible stretch. Now, we could get into the DFAing of a probable potential Hall of Famer when it's all said and done. But Baltimore, what are they going to do with their bullpen? I understand Kimbrel had a bad stretch. Kimbrel, the last few years, that's what he's been. When he's hot, he is still one of the best closers in the game. Like, it's not just the name. Now, he's had his inconsistent stretches. I hear you. But when he's on, he still has that upper 90s heater and that curveball, whatever you want to call it. And that two-pitch mix is more than good enough to get 3 outs in a major league game. Now, they DFA'd him. He had his worst stretch, I think, for his entire career with, I don't know how long it was. It was terrible. I get it.
Yeah.
But you know what? You're already down Bautista. They have Cano, who's a great eighth inning guy. I'm assuming he's going to try to be the closer now. Maybe they'll do some sort of committee, but I don't think they should have DFA'd Kimbrel. I know he was bad, but you know what? I don't know. Maybe it was the right move, but Kimbrel to me is a guy who could get hot and could save you a few games, or at least come in the seventh or do something. And for a team that is lacking, I think, some starting pitching, they didn't really go out and do anything there. I don't know. That's an interesting matchup to me. I still think Baltimore's got more star power, like you said, with all the young talent they have. But it would not shock me if Kansas City beat Baltimore because of their starting pitching.
Yeah, like you said, you touched on Baltimore did so they did go out and get some starting pitching. It's just it wasn't like what you should have gotten. You should have gotten a Crochet,
right?
Especially when you knew you were going to make the playoffs. Imagine Burns and Crochet, and you still have Zach Eflin too. So I don't know. Zach Eflin's their 2, Dean Kramer's their 3rd. So they could potentially sneak by this matchup. It's going to be it's going to come down to bullpen. I'm going to say it right now. It depends on if the Orioles, if their bats come out and really show what they can. Mountcastle, Westbrook.
It'll be a quick series if that's the case. But
100%. Adley Rutschman, Anthony Santander you could argue he's the AL MVP. 44 plus home runs, I think it was. He was incredible. Mullins is still good. Cowser, steps up. Gunnar Henderson, the Jackson Holiday. We haven't even mentioned him yet. He's had a shit year, but still, it's you talk about all these players that should be, really good for them. But the Royals, another team like Detroit, who just really stepped up and got hot. They have the pitching, Cole Reagans with game one, and then you got South Lugo in game two, Michael Waka, Brady Singer, and then they do have Michael Lorenzen too, if need be. So, and then they went
I
out and
like all
traded.
five of those guys. I
Same,
don't think any of
same,
those guys, especially the last two or three, those aren't guys you want starting games two or three, but those are guys that can get you innings. I mean, if you go 4 or 5 deep from Baltimore, no offense to Dean Kramer, but that's probably the weakest name you mentioned from those 3 or 4 from Baltimore and everyone from Kansas City. So
100%.
that's yeah.
And then you turn it over to the bullpen too. You got Chris Bubich and then Lucas Ihrig, who's been an incredible closer. He came over from Oakland. Um, that's going to be the tale of two games too. Can Kansas City's pitching staff limit the Orioles on offense? Because if you look at the Royals depth chart, it's not super pretty. You got Maikel Garcia. You obviously got Bobby Witt. It's going to be tough. It's going to come down to pitching. I want to pick the Orioles. I like the Orioles a lot with like what they've done with that system, but they shoot themselves in the foot year in and year out. But that being said, I'm gonna take the Orioles.
And it's funny because I'm actually going to take Kansas City in this one.
Perfect. I love it. I love that we're doing that. It's different. Um, yeah, I mean, I think Kansas City's pitching is better, but I do think that the hitters from the Orioles, especially with the game being in Baltimore, is going to be the difference maker.
And it should, absolutely. And I think, the last thing we'll say on this one is, it comes down to the starting pitching of Kansas City and the offense of Baltimore. And, Kansas City's offense, like you said, I mean, outside of Bobby Witt, where are they going to get their hits and their runs from? So there's a couple guys over there that are decent enough, but that's what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, and then obviously these games are still being played with right now with Atlanta and the Mets. Atlanta's got one out, bottom of the ninth, man on second. So we'll see if they come back and tie it up at least. But we'll see. But let's move into the first team to in the with Milwaukee. Milwaukee's one of those teams that just always gets the best out of their players, and they're playing without Christian Yelich, who is their cornerstone guy. But this could be the last hurrah for some of these guys on this team. You got Willie Adames. He's going to be a free agent, so you never know how long they're going to last. But you run through their players. You got Jackson Churio, who's a rookie, who's just been incredible. He's going to be the guy for that team for a long, long, long time. Sal Frelick, Garrett Mitchell. They just get the best out of guys that you don't like see. It's not the Dodgers. We're not talking Dodgers here. Their closer, probably one of the best in the game, Devin Williams.
Yep.
Freddie Peralta is a nasty starter. Aaron Savale, you don't know which one you're getting out of him. They went out and got Frankie Montas, and then Tobias Myers has been a young pitcher who's pitched really well for them too. William Contreras, can't leave him out, obviously.
Yeah.
He's incredible. He's had an incredible year as well. I think that their scenario was if the Braves win, they face either the Braves or D-backs. I think they could beat either of these teams just the way that the Brewers play. I think it all depends, though, because if you have to go against a Chris Sale, Max Fried, I think that's the difference maker because those guys can shut down their offense, and we've kind of seen the Brewers kind of get cold at times this year where they're not scoring a whole lot of runs, but they're doing it when they need to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Milwaukee is one of those teams. I don't think a lot of people are going to give a ton of what's the word I'm looking for here? I don't think a lot of people are super high on Milwaukee. And no offense, I don't think they should be either. Milwaukee had they had a great year. I'll be the first one to tip my cap to the Brewers, even though I don't want to. Even though I want to tip my cap with a hat full of shit in there for them. But you know what? Good for them. They won. They won the division, and they were the best team all year, hands down, in that division. Can they beat one of these teams, whether it's the Mets, Atlanta, or somehow Arizona? Sure, absolutely they could. But I think, for Milwaukee is very similar to Cleveland, where a couple of first-year managers and a couple of teams that have pitched and they play good defense, but the last few years, both of those teams did not have a good offense, and both teams this year had very good offenses with Cleveland and Milwaukee. Now, why is that? I would have to dive in and do some huge study. I'd have to get my PhD for it. I couldn't tell you. These are a lot of the same guys they've had, like you said. Milwaukee does, they develop players well. You have to
Joey Ortiz, Bryce Terang, good players, man.
you have to you got to give them credit for that. But you couldn't have seen this year with a first year manager for either team. You couldn't have seen the offense being this good for either team. So I would worry a little bit about Milwaukee's offense in the playoffs. I also worry about the lack of depth at the starting pitching for them too. Obviously, you don't have Burns anymore. I don't know what happened to Woodruff. I know he had shoulder surgery, missed the beginning of the year. Obviously, he's not in the picture right now. They're talking about Frankie Montas and Savali. So both guys who can give you innings and pitch well, but they're not necessarily, they're not probably your 2 and 3 starters that you want. So I'd be a little worried for them like that. And then, like you said, if they do end up having to play Atlanta. Now, Atlanta might not even be the scariest team of those three with Arizona and the Mets. The Mets are, like I said, I think they have the best record since sometime in June with all the teams, because that's why they're even in this position in the first place. Atlanta had such a down year for their standards with Acuna getting hurt and then the offense being a shadow of what it was last year. But the reason they're in this position, like you mentioned, your ex-buddy Chris Sale is having one of his best years. I looked a couple weeks ago. If I'm not mistaken, his record a few weeks ago was like 18-3. That's incredible. Unbelievable with the low 2 ERA, bunch of strikeouts like he normally does. It seriously is one of his best years he's had. And then, like you said, with Ronaldo Lopez having the great year he's had, and then Max Fried, those three for sure can give any team fits if they're on. I think for Atlanta, it just comes down to, can the offense give you enough? And I think with the guys they have, sure.
Chris Sale's going to get, because he had the Triple Crown. He had 18 wins, 2.38 ERA, and 225 strikeouts. Edged out Wheeler by 1 strikeout, which technically will be more because obviously he's going to pitch today for Atlanta. So we'll see. So pretty much if Atlanta wins, they will get in as a 6th seed. They will face the Brewers. And then if they don't, the D-backs get in and basically face the Brewers. So it's going to be close. Too early to say. I do think if the Braves get in, they will give the Brewers fits just because it is the Braves, but they don't have Riley. I think Riley might be out this postseason. Acuna's out, but they got Albies and they just seem to find a way to win. But talk about you, as you said, the Mets. Lindor has been the hottest hitter, I think, since, you could argue, if it wasn't for Ohtani, you could argue that he would be an MVP as well.
Yeah, you know what? I know I'd have to go back and see how hot he's been, but I know obviously I think him and Alonso and that whole team has just been on fire for a few months. And like we said, that's why they're in this position in the first place. They looked like, they were at some point in the year, they were, I think, 22-33, so 11 under. And now you're looking at them being, a few over and potentially making the playoffs. So,
okay, wait, correction. So if the Mets win. So this is super confusing, but I'm looking it up. So San Diego obviously will play the number 2 wild card, which will either be the Mets or Braves. So that will likely be the Mets if Atlanta wins. Now, if the Mets win, if the Mets win tonight, then it's Arizona playing Milwaukee, which, I don't want to break down too far into Arizona. They have a good chance to really do some damage again as a sneaky team, as they did last year. They made the freaking World Series, man.
Yeah.
They played kind of like they were very up and down this entire year. And I don't know if it was their pitching, but that's one of the teams that too, like Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, Brandon Pfaadt, Eduardo Rodriguez, Jordan Montgomery, A lot of names there. And then you throw into the picture, Corbin Carroll. So we're not going to go too crazy into the D-backs, but they can also be a team. If they sneak in, they would give Milwaukee fits too. So, watch whoever has to play Milwaukee.
Yeah, definitely. Either one of those teams. Like we said, Milwaukee could beat any of those teams, but they could also lose to any of those teams because I just don't think they're that good. So
I think it's because you got some sour grapes with that one, just because,
okay.
as you are, as I can admit, I am envious of how some of these teams with low budgets can just knock it out of the park. But moving into a team that doesn't utilize low budgets here, let's talk about the San Diego Padres. Dylan Cease, Michael King, Yu Darvish, Joe Musgrove, Martin Perez. That's their starting five. And then you throw in Manny Machado. When Manny Machado is hot, he looks like Manny Ramirez out there with all the home runs. Xander Bogaerts, Jurickson Profar, who we touched on about him having a huge year. Jackson Merrill, young player. And then you got to touch with Fernando Tatis as well.
San Diego is a scary team, and I don't want to spoil any picks here, but I'm going to have them winning at least one. And if I have them playing the Dodgers, I'm going to have them taking down LA. So I like San Diego.
Yeah, it's kind of a big brother situation. You throw it into the scenarios. Who's a better team, the Mets or San Diego at that point? That's going to be a hell of a matchup if that does occur. Just because, like we said, how hot the Mets have been. But do the Mets have enough pitching to take them over the edge and shut down the Padres? I think the Padres are just super inconsistent. They have the star power. It's just they're so up and down. I would also pick the Padres to win if they don't have to face the Mets. But let's see here. What do we got for the Mets? Who's their number 2? Who would be pitching tomorrow? So they got Severino. More than likely, he's getting the bump tomorrow in comparison to tonight because there's no need. There's no need to waste him. Sean Manaea. They threw out Tyler McGill tonight. And then we have to talk about Jose Quintana, man. That guy just has pitched really well this second half, too. Kind of just does what he always does, 6 innings and almost every start. And he went on a streak of like 4 straight starts without giving up a run.
Q gets it done. You look at his numbers at the end of the year, and he's had a few years, ever since the Chicago days with both teams. He's had a few years, a few up and downs, some years where the ERA's in the 4 or the 5s, but for the most part, Q's pretty consistent. He, I think he had some, what do you call it? People related him to Burley in a sense because he was, kind of a lefty, kind of went out there, like you said, give you 6 innings. And yeah, you look up and you're like, man, yeah, he had another solid year. He just keeps posting. He's a guy who's like never hurt. He's always giving you 20, 25, 30 starts a year. And good for him. We'll see if the Mets have enough juice to make it.
Yeah, I'm interested. They're in. It's just, we'll see if they make it in. You got Pete Alonso. They have a decent pitching staff. Sean Manaea has been pitching out of his mind too. So, good for the Mets. They're always shit on a lot, so it's kind of nice to see them make the playoffs at least. But we'll see. We'll see who they end up having to face. If they have to face San Diego, that's not a team I'd want to face in the first round. I'd probably take Milwaukee. But like I said, Milwaukee's like that Kansas City team where they just do the most with their players and develop super well. Anything else you want to touch on for the NL or AL?
We talked about. It's tough to talk about who the NL matchups.
Set.
It's tough to talk about that. The one team we really didn't mention is the Phillies.
And we didn't touch about them, the Guardians, the Yankees, or Dodgers, just because they get the bye weeks.
Yeah.
We'll touch on them during the divisional series, going forward. But if you want to touch on anything, Ohtani, this is his first playoff appearance, so that's going to be super exciting for the Dodgers. Phillies, what are we going to see out of them? Bryce Harper, the Red October, as they like to call it in Philly. I would love to see Philadelphia make it to the World Series too, just because I'm a big Bryce Harper guy, always have been. Should be interesting though.
It's shaping up to be another good postseason like we usually have. I'm excited to have a couple new teams in there, and I can't wait. What's going on with the Atlanta Mets game?
Mets won game one.
Okay, so the Mets won.
So Mets are in. Mets will face either San Diego if they win, or no, if they win again tonight, they face San Diego. If they lose, they will play
Milwaukee. Okay.
So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But
we're getting there.
Yeah. I'm going to take the Brewers to win game one or their first round. I think they end up having to play probably at the Dodgers and get their asses kicked, but we'll see. And then if I had to pick, give me San Diego as well. I don't think any of these other teams are going to get by either of those two, at least for the first round.
Well, I already told you I'm taking San Diego, so I'm definitely picking the Padres in that round. And then for the Milwaukee round, I am going to, in part out of spite, but in part out of I'm going to take whoever Milwaukee has to play.
Perfect. All right, my friend. I think that wraps it up. We'll close it out here. And good baseball to watch, so tune in tomorrow.
Mañana. Big day.